Hi, welcome. I'm Lisa Carlson. I'm the campus dietitian at Northwestern, and we're really excited to start our summer series. And this is a collaboration with Recreation and Northwestern Dining. And we have a special guest today. And usually in this series, it's kind of like Ask the Dietitian. And this time, the dietitian, me, is asking our culinary nutrition dietetic student, who is an intern at Northwestern this summer, to share a program that he's interested in, and that is on sharpening your skills on knives. And we've got Trevor Lehmann here today, and he's finishing up at Illinois State. He's got his culinary certificate. And when he finishes up his dietetics and nutrition in the fall, he's going to pursue a career as an R&D chef. So we're very excited to have Trevor. I'm going to turn it over to you, Trevor. I'm going to mute myself and go on off video, and you can get started.
Okay. Hello, everyone. So today we're going to teach you guys how to sharpen your knives and like your culinary knowledge with it. So with that, you're going to want to make sure that safety is very, very important when you're using your knives. Make sure when you're holding your knives, whenever you're walking with them, that you point that blade down, making sure never to get anyone injured with it. It's going to help prevent injuries in the kitchen and make life a lot smoother when you're working in kitchens. Also, another thing would be the wildcat claw. So when you have it, it's this picture right here. So it'll be just keeping that blade resting right on your knuckle as you're slicing. That way then the knife doesn't cut into your hand. Because if it's going to slice anything, it's only going to slice that little bit of your knuckle instead of actually slicing off a finger. So that's very important. Another way to do it is make sure when you're holding your knife, you always make sure to hold the blade, like not the blade, sorry, you're always holding the handle, but you're holding the handle right at where the blade meets it, wrapping a thumb there, and then wrapping your middle, the index finger right around it. So that way, then when you move your wrist, it moves the knife with it. So you have a lot more control with it. Another thing would be to get maybe a cut glove from your local grocery store, or you can even buy them on Amazon. They cost usually around $10 to $15 for a cut glove. Those are really important to make sure that injury is less likely in the kitchen. You can be in the kitchen without it, but this will, if you're scared of knives or don't have as much practice using them, you can always start off using a cut glove until you get more comfortable, and then you can go to not using it. So next, we got more about safety. Another thing is never leave your knife inside a sink. Just don't put this knife in there, because if it gets covered with a bunch of other dishes or anything else, it's accident waiting to happen. I've seen it happen in kitchens before when I was at culinary school, or even at my jobs I've worked. People will put the knife in there, and next thing you know, someone else will come up, they'll reach their hand in, going to grab a dish out of there, not realizing there's a knife there, and slice their finger with the knife. So making sure never to put a knife in the sink is a good way to make sure injury is less likely to happen at your workplace. Always make sure your knife is sharp. That's a very important part, because if you do cut yourself, it's better to cut yourself with a sharp knife than a dull knife, because if you cut yourself with a sharp knife, the knife cut will be cleaner, which means it'll also heal faster than if you cut yourself with a dull knife. So that's very important as well. Next, you can go on to maintaining your knives. This is very important to making sure your knife stays sharp. You can send your knives away to somewhere else, but if you're going to want to do it at home, you're going to need a whetstone, a bowl of soapy water to soak the whetstone in. You're going to need a towel to hold that whetstone in place, and then a knife steel to realign the blade after you're all done. So with that, there's a couple of tips and techniques that you can use. So one would be the seesaw motion, and just using that to go smooth strokes in and out. Also using the rule of thumb of 10 and 10, so you can make sure you get even amount of knife strokes on each side when you're sharpening it. So you can go ahead and do 10 on one side, 10 on the other side, and then repeat that as much as you need to. Then make sure also to dry your knife throughout. You don't want to leave the blade super wet. You can dry it on a towel in between after each side of 10. So that's one thing you can do. You also only need to sharpen your knives around once to twice a year. Any more than that, it could potentially harm your knives, causing damage to them by over sharpening can wear away the metal on the knife blade, and then you won't have much of a blade left. after a long time. It'll take a while for that to happen, but general rule is only once to twice a year is what you should, unless you're really using them like every single day and you're putting them through the ringer, slicing like, you know, coarse fruits or anything that has like a hard skin, then you might need to do it a little, like maybe add one more time in the year, but generally only once to twice a year. As I mentioned before, you can also get your knife sharpened by someone else instead of doing it yourself if you don't have the time or you don't want to invest in getting a whetstone or the steel and all that. You can get them done at like Williams-Sonoma or your Ace Hardware, or there's an online service called Knife Aid where you can send your knives out, mail them to them, they'll sharpen them all up and send them right back to you. So next we're going to go ahead and watch a video about knife sharpening and what to do for it. So what you're going to want to do is after that's soaked in, the whetstone has soaked in the soapy water for about 10 to 15 minutes, you're going to go ahead and pull it out like that and just put it onto your towel. I also have a little plastic piece there that helps keep it in place, but the towel just makes sure it doesn't move and catches any of the excess soapy water that you're going to be putting on the stone later. So you want to make sure that it doesn't move at all, like it stays in place. Next, you're going to take your knife and you're going to want to do smooth strokes. So like go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. And then you're gonna want to flip the side and do it the same thing again. So just keep going 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Oh, and then 10 would be for what you would want to do on there, unless I miscounted there. But then you just keep flipping it, going back and forth. When you're using that smaller side, my stone is a 1,000 to 3,500 grit. So when you're using that smaller number side, the 1,000, it'll actually like dull blade out. So that way then you can sharpen the blade again. Because when you're dulling the blade, you're getting rid of any of those little nicks or imperfections that the knife had gotten from when you were just using it from multiple times. So when you're dulling it out, you're basically getting rid of those nicks. And then you'll take it to the higher side. For mine, it's that 3,500 side. And you're going to go ahead and add a little bit more water and then run it through the same motions again for maybe 4 to 5 sets of it, maybe even longer to re-get the knife there. Next, you go ahead and take it on to steel, and you're going to go ahead and do the steel at about a 45-degree angle and run the knife down it, and then back up, down, and then up. It's a little bit hard to see here. I'll show you after the video about how to get it to a better point. So there we go. So after the handling, so actually going back with that, so what you're going to do, you're going to want to take your knife, you're going to want to hold it like this, and you're going to bring it at about 45 and then just bring it down. And when you're getting used to it and newer to it, you're going to want to make sure that you do it slow so you don't cut yourself at all. And then once you've done this multiple times, after being in culinary school for a long while, or even just doing this at home multiple times, and you've gotten more practice at it, and you're not going to cut yourself with it because you have more confidence, you can go really fast. Just keep going through. You see how it hit the thumb guard there? That's also very important, that you do not put your thumb over it like this, that you make sure the thumb stays like resting, pushing against it right there. So that way it only, if the knife does come down for the full way, it hits the thumb guard instead of hitting your thumb. So that's a very important key as well. So next we're going to talk about the different types of knives. So as you saw from mine earlier, this is my own personal chef's knife that I use. There's multiple varieties of chef's knife you can get at your local grocery store, or even hardware stores might have a chef knife depending, but you can find them there. It's one of your most versatile knives. You're going to use it for everything in your kitchen, from cutting celery for your soup to dicing the onion to maybe small dicing an apple if you need to for a recipe, or even using the chef's knife to slice up the chicken for your meal later, getting it into nice little bite-sized pieces. Another thing would be the paring knife. This is one of the smaller knives you're going to have in your kitchen. The paring knife is very useful if you're going to be cutting fruits or vegetables. What I like to use it for is holding the orange in my hand, and then you can slice off the top and the bottom, and then you can use it by holding the orange in your hand. You can segment it and actually get orange peels out. I've done this multiple times. It was actually a skill we had to learn when I was on the culinary competition team at my local culinary school. We had to learn how to do that skill for our competitions, and the oranges you get out of it are just amazing. There's no pulp left to it. It just melts in your mouth as you eat it. It's so good. It's a skill, a little bit of a tricky skill to learn, but it's very useful to have that knowledge. There's also the fillet knife. The fillet knife would be very useful if you're going to be slicing or fabricating or deboning fish. So it's easy if you want to buy a whole fish at the market instead of buying just the fish fillets. If you already know how to do it, you can fabricate the whole entire fish and save on cost there for the day, but it is a little bit of a tricky skill to learn. The fillet knife also has a bend to it, so when you put the blade to the cutting board, it'll actually bend, so that way you can get an easier cut on the fish. Another knife would be your bread knife. This is also very important to have in your kitchens, because if you're going to be slicing bread or maybe a bagel or anything else, other kind of things, maybe an English muffin, anything like that, the bread knife is very useful because it has a serrated edge, which will make it easier to cut through bread and move through it, because it'll actually just in a sense rip apart the bread, but like in a good way of like moving through it, instead of like the knife like this without a serrated edge. It'd be very hard to cut through bread because bread's a little tough sometimes because of all the gluten built up in there that bread has in it. So there's also a meat slicer you can use. A meat slicer is one knife that you don't particularly need in your kitchen. I think it's very useful if you're going to be cutting steaks or pork chops after they come off the grill. You can use a chef knife or even a sharp fillet knife, but I think a meat slicer does a wonderful job of just getting those perfect nice slices off of the cuts. There also is one other knife that you should really have in your kitchen, especially if you're a college student. You really should have it, and that is your pizza cutter. The pizza cutter is very important to have in your kitchen, because I've tried when I was at college, when I moved out for the first time going to ISU, I didn't have a pizza cutter in my kitchen one of the first weeks I was there, and I wanted to make a pizza. I tried using a chef's knife to cut it, just moving the knife along, and almost burnt myself a couple of times on the stone that I was cooking it on. Just didn't work out. So the pizza cutter saved my life of going for less burns in the kitchen. It just made my life a lot easier, being able to go 1 and 2 and 3. So just and 4, just easily making it my life a lot simpler in the kitchen. So that's one knife you should really put in your kitchen as a pizza cutter. There's also a variety of different cuts that you can use. The small dice is one of the most popular cuts you'll see. Recipes will usually either say small dice an onion, or small dice maybe some celery or carrots or something for a soup. There's also the medium and large dice. Those aren't used as much, but you can see them here. Like it's just a small little, that would be more of the small dice, just small little dice cuts there. There's also a julienne. Juliennes are used more for salads than anything because of the shape they have. They're thin and long, but they're not going to be used too much in regular dishes unless you're going to be using them as a garnish or in a salad. There's also the minced or rough chop. This is another cut you'll see a lot of times because recipes will call for either minced garlic or even crushed garlic. If it says crushed garlic, you can also use the mince if you want to use fresh garlic. Or you can buy a little tool that we have in my house that you can put the garlic in and then crush it down to make it just simply, you don't have to worry about a mess of like a cutting board and a knife, but it does lose a little bit of flavor in my opinion if between mincing and crushing it, because crushing kind of bruises it through when mincing just slices it into nice little pieces and without bruising the garlic. There's also a diagonal cut. Diagonal is a very useful cut if you're wanting to put some nice little vegetables on the plate, like carrots or even a celery or parsnips or anything like that that would go on a plate for being a steamed vegetable or glazed vegetable for your meal. It's also, it looks a little bit better than your typical Bird's Eye or Green Giant little frozen steamer bags that you get peas and carrots in. The diagonal cut just makes it look a little bit nicer and kind of elevates your dish if you want to make it look a little nicer. So we also have 2 videos here. We're going to show you guys how to do a small dice, a rough chop, and a diagonal cut. So here we go. So first, we're going to show you guys how to do these small dice. So first off, you're going to want to grab your cutting board. And this is very important, is when you're putting your cutting board on there, you want something underneath it, because if you don't, this will happen. If you push up and down and even going left to right with it, it'll just move without any hesitation, and just you could easily slice yourself with that. So you can buy, like I just put underneath there was a thing of shelf liner, and it still moves, but not as much. It stays in place a little bit easier. You also can use a wet paper towel. That'll work easily as well. But as you can see, when I'm trying to slice just there, moving my fingers along, it didn't move. But now if I just move my knuckles like that on there, it moves very easily. So that's accident waiting to happen if you don't have something underneath your cutting board to hold it in place. So with that, we're going to go ahead and take an onion, and we're going to do a small dice and a rough chop of it. So first, what you're going to want to do is, after you've gotten the onion cleaned in half, you're going to want to take it and never use your fingers like the Wildcat claw. This is weird to say because we just mentioned how it's very important to use it. The Wildcat claw is good if you want to slice the onion or anything, but if you're going to do a dice, you can easily cut yourself with it, as I'm about to show you here. So we have it there. If you do it like that, you could easily, once you get to the top part of the onion, slice into your finger. I've actually seen that happen with one of my friends on our competition team. He cut himself one time like that, thinking he had it okay, but it just didn't work out. And he actually had to go to the hospital to make sure his finger was okay, because he cut in so deeply. So what you're going to do there is you're going to put the palm of your hand onto the onion to make sure it stays in place and you don't slice yourself. And then you're going to move clean strokes throughout it. And then you're going to want to go ahead and make sure you don't cut as far as I just did. Only cut the tip of the knife to the root of the onion. Make sure it all stays in place. And then you're going to make those little cuts there. So that way, then when you turn it here, and you make sure you never cut that root end off or anything, because they want to leave that intact. If you cut that root end off, the onion will all disintegrate and it won't be as nice. So what we're going to do is we're going to actually take it, turn it around, holding that in place. And then we're going to go ahead and slice it. So we got the onion there, got the nice Wildcat claw now to use. And you go down and then over again and down. And then you get a nice small dice after running this through. You just want to make sure you get those nice clean cuts and strokes throughout it. And then at the end of it, you're going to see how we're going to make sure to save as much onion as possible so food waste goes down. So after you got that onion right there, you got all the nice little small dice that you just did. You're left with this little bit left on the root end. And this kind of becomes a problem if you're working in kitchens, because this would be food waste and food costs that you're just throwing down the drain, throwing into the garbage. So what we're going to do is take it and cut little pieces right next to the root end and then slice again. It'll get us a nice little small dice. So there again, flipping it on each side. And then look, all you're left is with a little bit of the root end. So with that little bit of the root end left, you can just throw that away. You don't need to keep it. Then you've also got this piece. You can just easily slice it from earlier to meet up with the small dice pieces, as I'm going to do here, just cleaning it up real quick. So just chop, 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 moving along through and slicing it nicely. So then you're to get a rough chop, all you're going to want to do is just take your onion that you have there. Oh, actually, we got to clean up a little bit more, I guess. So then what we're going to do is we're going to take this and we're going to go ahead and just move it through knife once again. So that's a nice small dice, but a rough chop is even smaller than that. So what you're going to do is you're going to take your thumb, put it onto the cutting board like I just showed you, then rest the rest of your hand on top of the blade and then just rock it through. Just keep rocking through the cutting board, making sure to get all the pieces there. And then what you could do is use the knife to scoop it all back up into one place. That way then you can not create an entire mess. See, like right there, we're going to go ahead and move it all back into a little pile. And then we're going to go ahead and clean the blade. This is very a time where you can get injured easily. So make sure when you're doing that, you just keep one nice strong stroke of it without like getting too close to the knife blade handle. So you go there and keep moving through, just clean it like that. And then that's going to be done. Now I'm going to show you guys how to go ahead and do a diagonal cut. So what you're going to want to do is you're going to want to go ahead and take a peeled carrot that's already for you, peeled and washed. And then you're going to go ahead and slice that, the tip off of that. So the top part right there, slicing as little as possible. And then taking, if it's thin at the bottom, making sure that you get rid of most of that thin portion. And you're going to want to go ahead and then take your carrot and cut it, as the name implies, on a diagonal. So you're going to take it from an angle and then slice, and then just roll the carrot, and then slice it again, roll it, and then slice, roll it, and then slice, roll, and slice. And it gives you these nice little diagonal cuts that look a lot different than the typical ones you see in the steamer bag, where it's a little cube of a carrot or anything like that, or even just circles of carrots. This gives it a nice little design for when you're going to go ahead and be using them for a glazed vegetable or maybe even roasted vegetables. So you've got that, and then you're going to want to make sure if you have the bigger pieces, you go ahead and chop them down so that everything's around uniform size. So next, we just got this brief summary of everything. So we've got knife safety. The knife is the most important tool in your kitchen, next to the pizza cutter, might I add. The pizza cutter is also very important. But also just make sure your knife is always sharp, and that you maintain your knives only about once to twice a year to make sure they stay sharp for you. Always make sure to use that wildcat claw if you're slicing anything. Unless you're doing the small diced onion, then make sure you use the palm and then the wildcat claw. So I hope this has been very informative for you. And next we got a couple of questions coming from Nancy.
Thank you, Trevor. Wow. I know I personally learned so much. And I'm kind of just in awe. I was following you so well on cutting onions. I've been cutting them all wrong for so many years. So I think I've got a two-part question. Where's a good place to buy knives? And do you need to spend a lot of money? Or what should you expect to spend?
For where to buy knives, my suggestion would be like your local grocery store, or maybe even a Target, a Walmart, someplace like that. They'll have knives in their home kitchen sections, so you can go buy one there. You might spend around maybe $10 to $20 on a knife, nothing too extravagant. Unless you want to get a really, really good knife, you can go to certain companies. Like the one I got is a global knife. It's cost around $100 to $120. But that's because I went to culinary school and I wanted to get a knife that stayed sharper longer, had a little bit more durability to it. So I wanted to make sure I got something really nice. But if you're not going to be doing that, if you're just a college student who needs a knife to get them through while they're away from home, just to slice the onions or anything that real quick, a $10 to $15 knife will last you really well, as long as you can maintain it like I've shown you in the video.
Okay, great. Also, if you don't have one of those nice bagel cutters, what is the safest way to cut a bagel? I've always heard that that's the number one reason why people go to the ER is cutting bagels. So what's the safest way to cut a bagel?
With that, bagels, usually when people are doing it, they'll try to do it from, like, they're going to take it from the side and they're on a cutting board or anything. They'll be like, they might even hold it and they'll try to go like this, which isn't really good because you usually have your fingers connected to try in that little hole to make sure it stays in place. That's an easy cut waiting to happen through there. You can also, if you're doing the guillotine style, that's another way to cut yourself. It just doesn't really work. My suggestion is taking the bagel like we did the onion and laying it on a cutting board and just moving the knife through like this. Making sure you get those nice clean cuts going through with the bread knife and just moving it nicely through the center. And it should give you a nice clean cut. The same would go for any like English muffin or anything like that.
Okay, wow. Those are all the questions I really have. Your presentation was so informative and so interesting. I know I personally took a lot away, and I hope that our viewers will too. So thank you. Thank you for sharing your expertise, and we wish you all the best with your future endeavors.
Thank you.